was just going to make sure you got it adjusted.
Yeah.
Students, if you'll go ahead and find your seats for the presentation. Students outside in the hall, if you can hear me, can you tell them to go ahead and just clear out the hall? So students, I'd like to remind you all to please be quiet and respectful during the presentation. Also, please don't get up and move out during the presentation. We'll leave during the Q&A out of respect for the speaker. So we are about to get started. All right. Thank you all so much for being here at the senior thesis presentations. We are about to get started with our next presentation. So up next, we have Craig Vandenbroek. He's going to be telling us a little bit about the redistribution of land in South Africa. So Craig, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Picture this. It's just another day, and you're taking a walk on the beach. When all of a sudden, you see a dot appear on the horizon. This dot grows increasingly bigger as it approaches your shores. You run back to tell your friends and family, and soon they're all standing beside you on the beach, watching this object get closer. Smaller objects are lowered into the water, and all of a sudden, a people you've never seen the likes of before comes to your shores. These people are speaking a language you don't understand, wearing cloth all over their bodies, and their skin is pale. They are nice to you at first, but soon they force you and your people off of the land you have lived on for generations and enslave your friends and family. You cannot fight back, as their weapons are simply too powerful. There needs to come a time when we remedy these injustices, and that time is now. It is no secret that Africa has been a victim of colonization. As in many cases of colonization, the native people of the areas that were colonized were treated with violence and injustice. The colonization of the Republic of South Africa itself started in the early 1600s when the Dutch merchant and traveller Jan van Riebeeck was tasked with occupying Table Bay, the location of modern-day Cape Town. The settlement was initially intended to be a location for merchants to stop and reload their ships with fresh water and supplies, but by 1662, the Cape Colony had become a complex, racially stratified society. Some of the settlers were given the title of Burghers, which gave them the right to land holdings which they cultivated. The land that they cultivated, however, was not their homeland. The land was initially occupied by the Khoisan, the term given to all Native African people in the area. Although the interactions between the Khoisan and Dutch settlers were not originally violent, the Dutch soon began to force the Khoisan off of the land they intended to cultivate or develop. Disease wiped out much of the Khoisan, and the remaining natives were killed or badly assaulted by the Dutch. They refused to cooperate. After over 200 years of forcing the native people off of their land, and 3 years after South Africa received its independence, the 1913 Land Act was passed. This act forced black Africans to live in reserves and made it illegal for them to work as sharecroppers. This marked the beginning of legal racial segregation in South Africa. With increased economic tensions brought on by World War II and the Cold War, there was a push for further segregation of the South African people. The Afrikaner National Party, who had won the general election, did so by promoting its plan of implementing apartheid, which is literally translated to separateness. The goal of apartheid was to decrease the political power of the black South African majority, referred to as the Bantu people, by separating them not only from the white minority, but from other black South Africans. Apartheid became law in 1950 and separated black South Africans by tribe as well as race. It wasn't only the black South Africans impacted by apartheid, however, as the Population Registration Act of 1950 classified all people in the country by race. These classifications included Bantu, Kara, which people of mixed race, Asian, and white. All black South Africans were moved into self-governed Bantu homeland areas known as Bantustan. There were 10 in total, and every citizen was classified as a citizen of one of these areas. Seeing as these areas were self-governed, the black population of South Africa was effectively removed from the South African political body, allowing the white government to claim that there was not a black majority. Any black people who formerly lived in areas that were classified as rural white areas were forced into Bantustans, and their land was sold at low prices to white farmers. More than 3.5 million Bantu people were taken from their homes and forced into a life of poverty during the time of apartheid. In 1967, there was a demonstration by thousands of black children outside the black township of Soweto against the requirement of the Afrikaans language as the medium of education in black schools. Police used tear gas and opened fire on the crowd. This demonstration caused many more black South Africans to rise up and conduct multiple more demonstrations, which caused international media attention. This media attention shed light on the injustices which were occurring in the country, and a global effort was made in order to try and get South Africa to repeal apartheid. In 1994, with the combined efforts of the African National Congress, the current leading political party, and its leader Nelson Mandela, as well as the president at the time, F.W. de Klerk, apartheid finally came to an end. When apartheid officially ended, there were many efforts to bring about equality among different races. This was done in part by making laws and legal decisions based on the Freedom Charter. The Freedom Charter is a document which contains the guidelines for a political program for post-apartheid South Africa. It is in this document that highlights the way in which the people and the country shall be governed once freedom had been achieved, and it is in this document that it states, the land shall be shared amongst those who work it. Restriction of land ownership on a racial basis shall be ended, and all the land redivided amongst those who work it, to banish famine and land hunger. In February of 1997, the new Constitution of South Africa came into effect. Just as it is in the United States of America, the Constitution highlights the power that the government holds. In Section 2, Article 25, Part 2, A and B, it is explicitly stated that property may be expropriated only in terms of law of general application for a public purpose or in the public interest, and subject to compensation, the amount of which and the time and manner of payment of which have either been agreed to by those affected or decided or approved by a court. Part 4 of the same section states that for the purposes of the section, the public interest includes the nation's commitment to land reform and to reforms to bring about equitable access to all South Africa's natural resources. Part 8 of the section states that no provision of the section may impede the state from taking legislative and other measures to achieve land, water, and related reform in order to redress the results of past racial discrimination. This part of the Constitution of South Africa shows first and foremost that the South African government does hold the legal power to expropriate land if it deems the cause of expropriation to be in the best interest of the country as a whole. One of the major issues in negotiating the purchase of land is the concept of willing buyer, willing seller, a concept that cannot work in South Africa's current economic climate. This is because in the liberal process of market relations, the two parties or negotiators need to have an equal financial standing. This is not the case in South Africa, as it has the highest Gini coefficient in the world. As described in The Economist, the Gini coefficient is an aggregation of the gaps between people's incomes into a single measure, meaning that if all the people in the country had the same income, the coefficient would be 0, and if all income went to one person and no one else, the coefficient would be 1. The current Gini coefficient in South Africa is 0.64, with 10% of the population earning 50% of the household income and 40% of the population earning 7% of the household income. This outlines that South Africa is far from a reasonable place to base property purchase on the concept of willing buyer, willing seller. On top of the current financial inequality, past racial inequality also plays a role in the unequal and unfair distribution of land in the country. When South Africa was originally colonized in 1652, the native people of the area, the Khoisan, was slaughtered, and the land on which they lived was captured by conquest. The Khoisan were driven from the place which they originally inhabited and forced out into less fertile places of the country. This shows clearly that the colonizers did not engage in the concept of willing buyer, willing seller, yet the current expectation of two parties negotiating a purchase of land is still based on this concept. This now brings us to the issue of primitive accumulation, otherwise known as accumulation by dispossession. Primitive accumulation is the act of using the land which has been dispossessed by another to turn it into a mode of production of capital. In simpler terms, someone who steals land not only keeps said land, but also makes money from it. This is what has happened to countless native people in South Africa multiple times. All the fertile land was occupied by the colonizers who killed the native people with superior weaponry and used fear to drive them from their homes. They then cultivated the land and sold the products. When valuable natural resources such as diamonds were found in the northern parts of the country, the indigenous people were once again forcefully relocated. As well as hired to mine the resources from the land that they had once occupied so that they could produce capital for the same people who relocated them. Most of this land, which has been taken by force and exploited for capital, has not been inhabited again by the Aboriginal South African people, as the land has either been destroyed, as is the case where a mine has been started, or the so-called owner of the land refuses to engage in trade negotiations due to the concept of willing buyer, willing seller. When South Africa was still facing the hardships of apartheid, the political party, the African National Congress, needed to formulate a plan to make the country a place where all people, regardless of color, race, sex, or belief, could live in harmony and have equal rights. They came up with the document that was mentioned earlier, the Freedom Charter. Apart from the section titled, "The land shall be shared amongst those who work it," there is a section which describes how wealth should be shared amongst the people of the country. This section is titled, "The people shall share the country's wealth," and it states, the national wealth of our country, the heritage of all South Africans, shall be restored to the people. The mineral wealth beneath the soil shall be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. Despite this being stated as a goal for the new South Africa, white South Africans still own 72% of the 37 million hectares of land that is owned by individuals. What makes the statistics significant in the case for land redistribution is that the white population only makes up 8.9% of the entire population. It should also be noted that even though the idea of wealth and land redistribution plays a prominent role within the Freedom Charter, it does not mention the concept of willing buyer, willing seller. South Africa was experiencing much adversity in the time of apartheid. However, this adversity was more of a social issue than an economic one. Due to the sanctions as well as boycotts that the country received due to its discriminatory system of government, allowed for import substitution industrialization. This means that due to the lack of the ability to import finished products from other countries, the South African people had to produce all finished goods themselves in order to be a functioning nation. South Africa did a phenomenal job of doing so, as the country has an adequate amount of raw materials, as well as the ability to train people to produce the finished goods that were no longer available via international trade. All the labor-intensive work that is required to make finished products, which includes working in factories where there is high risk involved, was conducted by the native people. Even though the country produced all the goods it needed to function and prosper independently from the rest of the world, all the profit and valuable goods were received by the non-native population. And so even in a time where the country had a stable method of production, the indigenous people did not reap any of the benefits. In fact, all of the Aboriginal South African people at the time were forced to live in communities which are comparable to the Native American reserves, unless they carried a pass which gave them legal permission to be in so-called white areas where the places of industry were located. When apartheid came to an end, so did the import substitution, industrialization. South Africa began to import most of its finished goods, and as a result, all the industries became a redundant means of production. This loss of industry led to a massive loss of jobs. This meant that the native population was now earning a significantly lower portion of the household income, thus driving the Gini coefficient up and making the concept of willing buyer, willing seller a larger issue, and taking away many opportunities from the indigenous people to purchase their own land. It is clear and undisputable that the Aboriginal people of South Africa have been severely mistreated for hundreds of years. Their land was blatantly stolen and abused for its capacity to produce a profit for the thieves. After the land was taken and the native people finally achieved legal equality in their own home, they were now faced with the issue of liberal market relations, which operates under the concept of willing buyer, willing seller. It is this concept which has prevented them from becoming equal members of society to the non-native minority, which has ruled over them for an extensive period of time. In today's current economic climate, the only solution to remedy the damage caused by colonization is to provide the native people with a land that they can make a living from. Land expropriation and redistribution is the solution to multiple problems. 13% of the population of 53 million people are classified as homeless, a term which is inclusive of people who live in the streets as well as in informal dwellings. 25% of the population is unemployed. Through the redistribution of land, these figures would significantly decrease, as there is enough land to provide shelter for the entire population. And once the native people receive the land, they can start farms to provide food for themselves as well as others. They will also be able to provide jobs to others if they choose to use their land for a commercial purpose. Once the indigenous people have acquired a new source of income and security from their property, they will simultaneously improve the country's Gini coefficient, and the concept of willing buyer, willing seller shall become a viable one. With this outcome, the nation of South Africa will be able to enter a new age of prosperity. Whenever the topic of land expropriation is discussed, Zimbabwe, previously known as Rhodesia, is inevitably mentioned. Zimbabwe is well known for its expropriation of the land of Caucasian farmers in the country. The economy and currency of the country have since taken a turn for the worse, as many would argue, as a result of the land expropriation. There have been multiple occasions when South Africa has been compared to Zimbabwe, with the recent incidents of land invasions and talk of land expropriation without compensation. One cannot compare South Africa to Zimbabwe when it comes to land reform. South Africa cannot legally follow the model of land expropriation that Zimbabwe used, nor does the current President Cyril Ramaphosa intend to use said model. As compared to Zimbabwe, South Africa shall not nationalize any land that is expropriated. President Ramaphosa does currently hold the legal power to order the execution of such an act, according to the section of the South African Constitution mentioned earlier, Section 25, Part 8, which states, "No provision of this section may impede the state from taking legislative and other measures to achieve land, water, and related reform in order to redress the result of past racial discrimination." However, he does not exercise his power to carry out this action, as it is known that if South Africa holds the same model as Zimbabwe when it comes to land expropriation, the economy and the people of the nation will suffer. One more important point to note when it comes to the South African-Zimbabwe comparison is that the Zimbabwean government actively encouraged land grabs, whereas the South African government has strictly condemned as well as outlawed the act. Another argument that is made against the redistribution of land in South Africa is that it shall only target Caucasian farmers. This, however, is not the case. David Masondo, a member of the current ruling party's Economic Transformation Committee, said that no land that is productively utilized shall be expropriated. He goes on further to say that to keep the land you own, you must use it or lose it, even if you are black, and makes the qualification for land that can be expropriated to vacant land, unused land, and land used for speculative purposes. Caucasians do own most of the private farmland. However, farmland is not the sole target of the land to be expropriated. There is a considerable amount of land that also belongs to the different tribes of South Africa. The Zulu tribe, for instance, owns 30% of all the land in the province KwaZulu-Natal, according to the Ingonyama Trust. The province of KwaZulu-Natal itself is roughly the size of Portugal. Most of the land which is owned by the Zulu tribe is not inhabited nor utilized. It is these areas of land which are uninhabited and not used in a productive manner which will be expropriated, not land that is used productively, regardless of the race of its owner. There are also many Caucasian farmers who own many farms that they do not use as a mode of income and hardly even go to. These farmers should be more than willing to give their land to the poor and homeless native people of South Africa. This is the only way that the native and homeless people living in South Africa today can have hope for creating a brighter future in which they have shelter and the ability to grow their own food, as well as develop a mode of income with the new resources that they did not have when they did not have any land. In the times we all live in today, there have been many things done to try and stop discrimination. However, there comes a time where we need to remedy the injustices caused by discrimination and give those who were once oppressed a foothold in the world that has so rapidly evolved around them. In the case of South Africa, the only viable solution to remedy the damage caused by colonization is to provide people with land that they can make a living off of. The same land that was taken from them by people from other continents in order to make a profit for themselves. With the correct model in place, many more homeless and landless South Africans will be able to grow their own food as well as protect themselves from the elements. With this model, we will also not cause any economic damage, as no productive land shall be expropriated. We will not turn out like Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Greg. That was an excellent presentation. We're going to move into the Q&A portion of our time now. So judges, as you come up with questions, you can ask them real quick.
Great job. Great job. Yes, sir. Is it bad?
All right, third time's the charm. Good job, Craig. Would your proposed redistribution of land be based solely on race?
It's not a racial issue. It would go more towards the tribal heritage of someone because, not all people with dark complexions are from South Africa. But we do know which tribes have been in the country for hundreds of years, and so if you can prove you're part of that tribe, you will be eligible to receive land.
If you gave every tribal member or redistributed land to every tribal member that sought such land, do you think that in and of itself would create prosperity?
No, sir. I don't believe we should just be giving out land. I think there needs to be training involved. You have to go through a process to apply for a land grant. So something that would teach people how to farm, for example, so that they would have the necessary skills to grow their own food on the land which they have been given. We can't just give handouts and just hope that things would set themselves straight. We will have to put in some extra effort and training into this process for it to be successful.
Yeah, it would seem that education and capability are key to that. Is that part of the framework that has been set forth by those that are supporting the land redistribution to provide those tribal members education, skills, capabilities that would help them be successful?
Sadly, there are many people in South Africa already campaigning with the sole promise of land expropriation. However, they do not have the same views as myself. They would like to, and I quote, kill the white man. And they would like to only take land from the Caucasian farmers and just give the land to the people so that they can just claim a plot of land and take it for themselves without any real training being put into it. When I feel like it needs to be a process that is not related to hate in any sort of way, as the people in South Africa are already feeling it's a hate process, something that we want to do to the white man because they did this to us. And this process would be better because it's not making it about race. It's acknowledging that the white man did come in and take your land from you, and we should be giving that land back. But we can't just give it to you and assume that you're going to prosper there. We need to ensure that you have the necessary skills in order to make sure that you make full use of that land.
So, along that line, how do you protect, or is part of the plan to protect, I guess, with the education? It reminds me of after the American Civil War, and though slaves were freed, they were still held down economically, and it's easy to get in the cycle of, especially when you're talking agricultural, having enough money to go ahead and start planting the crops and making enough money for each following year is what's part of that plan to protect the people from abuse and credit getting into that hole. I'm pulling up.
I'm not exactly sure how one could go about maintaining a steady source of income after receiving land. However, what my idea would be after giving the training to people who applied for some land would also to provide them with seeds for their first crop. And I'm not a farmer, so I'm not sure how these things work, but I do believe that crops you grow produce their own seeds, which they could then use for their next crop. So it's starting out with being able to provide food for yourself and shelter for yourself, and then moving on to getting a stable source of income, that type of thing.
Do you see other possible solutions outside of the redistribution of land to solve the inequality issue within South Africa?
No, I do not. It's already gotten to the point where there is so much hate towards people who have come in and essentially taken the land from the native population. I think it would, besides just an act of good faith, but a step in the right direction to give them back what we have taken from them. And seeing from the Gini coefficient, since the household income goes in bulk to the rich, there's no real way that they could purchase their own land, and that's a big purchase. Anyone who's bought land here would know. So I think really the only way to get this process started to forgive all the past racial inequality and start to remedy that would only be to give them that.
In this discussion, though, it seems like, based on some of your feedback, that the economic prosperity of solving one of the sins of the past, which was taking land that shouldn't have been or wasn't that of white people, giving that land back is great, but unless the people that get the land back, the tribal natives, have the ability to create prosperity, you're going to have people with land that they don't know how to manage it. So have you thought of, or are there ways to achieve or increase the probability of that prosperity that might be something other than just giving the land back? If those tribal villagers, or the tribal natives, were given other possibilities to create economic prosperity without land ownership, is there any possibility of that working, something short of giving land and the responsibility of cultivating that land back, but giving education, training, other work that allows the people to achieve prosperity, to do just that? Because it doesn't appear to me that it's just getting the land back, it's also putting those people in a position to create their own success and prosperity, and that is more driven by education and training than it is having a plot of land.
As I said earlier, to receive the land, there would have to be some sort of process where they receive training and education, and I don't believe it should be a once-off thing where you go for 3 hours to an auditorium with 300 other people and just take a test, and they're like, oh, you're eligible for some land now. It would be more of a recurring process where if you would want to keep the land that you've been given, you'll have to go to multiple sessions where someone will educate you on different skills that you would need, because many people in South Africa are uneducated, and so there would be that would be a step in starting to get people to have more education in South Africa on top of giving them something which they don't have.
Has there been a willingness for those people that might seek out land to embrace that, to embrace the opportunity for education and training?
As of right now, the expectation is for a handout. So right now, I don't think people would be thrilled to hear that they'd have to put in extra work to get something, much like a high school student. But if it is the only solution, in the only way the government says, if you would like some land, you will have to go through this process. They will have to kind of deal with that and take that opportunity into their own hands.
I guess that's what I was trying to get at before, is that just owning land, being given land, doesn't provide shelter. And it's an expensive endeavor. You may now have been given a piece of land, but building some type of shelter is expensive. And if they already have economic issues and don't have that income, having the land doesn't fully do anything. So in your research, were there additional parts to the plan besides just proving that you deserve this land, how to help someone do something with that land? It's an expensive endeavor to begin.
My research was mostly focused on why the people would deserve the land, and I didn't look too far into the steps that came beyond that. Everything that I've mentioned about the steps that came beyond that are just things that I've personally thought about throughout the process of writing this thesis. But I'm sorry, I do not have all the answers figured out to what comes after they have received their land.
So, Greg, one of the cruxes to your argument is this concept of the willing buyer and willing seller. Can you give us a working definition of those two concepts?
Willing buyer, willing seller, which is one concept, actually. It's just the idea that if I want to sell you something, you will have to buy it at the price I give you. So, if I'm willing to sell, you are willing to buy, but we have to have an equal economic standing or equal financial standing in order to make that trade work. And so, obviously, in South Africa, where most of the household income only goes to a small percentage of the population, it makes the concept of willing buyer, willing seller hard to follow just because of the financial inequality between the two parties negotiating something, especially if there's a large amount of money involved, like a purchase of land.
Craig, in your research, I'm just curious, was there any noticeable difference in the sophistication of farming in South Africa versus other developed countries, regardless of race? Just successful farmers in South Africa, are they, from a technology standpoint, at the same level of successful farmers in, say, North America? Or did you do any of that research?
I did not come across that in my research.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the judges, do you have any other questions for Craig?
Great job.
All right, thank you, Craig, for your answers. Thank you, judges, for your questions. All right, so we'll take another break until the next presentation. Thank you all for being here.
If you don't have the blade run.
And rotting in a jail cell.
Whenever that price tag comes in, I will. You bet. Good job. Thank you. The price tag comes in, my line says.
If you ever go into stand-up. Yeah, we missed that.